Hello, everyone. What a time to be alive. Humanity faces challenges against an invisible force, a force that many feel most everywhere now. From birth to the cradle, from vaccinations to the political realm, the takeover of our lives. Welcome to Shining on the Shadows. I'm Kathleen Fitzgerald. It's November 1st, 2020. We're going to be talking about a very intense subject. If you'd like to get a piece of paper and a pencil, my guest is going to be talking about a book and also some different aspects of course, the topic, this satanic conspiracy to take over the world. So we're going to be talking about how we got here and why we're here with the contact tracing and the COVID lockdowns, and everything that you are experiencing today seems to be coming from originally one source, which I call Khazarian Mafia, the mafiosa cabal. So I want to take just a minute to encourage you to like and share, hit the bells and whistles, and give the Global Enlightenment Radio Network, Soma and Fusion heads up and a like. Click on those bells and whistles. So if you like the content, and please share this information, as we're trying to get this out. It's very important that we all understand. I like to find variable sources. I like to find documents, and I've found a person here that's well read. He has plowed through the information, and we're going to try to, instead of you sitting there for hours and hours and hours trying to decipher and understand the information, my guest, Pat Price, has read all of the Phoenix journals. He's going to give you some websites and some names that you can yourself then go and research yourself. It's very important that we do this. So first of all, thank you for being on the show, Pat. We welcome you to Shining on the Shadows, and we're excited to get down to this business. Now, would you like to say a little bit about yourself and why you're sitting here with me on this topic?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me on here. I'm very excited to be here, and I've been following your shows. What is this, your 9th show or something like that?
Yeah, this is episode 9. I forgot to say that, everyone. Episode 9. So.
Yeah, I've really been impressed with the caliber of your guests and your ability to really get to the bottom of the issues. So I'm very, very proud of to be on your show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So, you gave me just a little sheet here of the book that we're going to talk about. Right. Let me read you the title, everybody. It's a very long title. Now, this book is really old, 1798. Is that right?
Yeah.
So in his journey to quest for the truth about the Zionists, about the banksters I always talk about, we're gonna bring to light this book for sure. And then behind me is a chart, and that was found in one of the journals, and we're gonna get to that too. So the name of this book is called Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All the Religions and Governments of Europe, Carried On in the Secret Meetings of Freemasons, Illuminati, and Reading Societies. And then it goes on, collected from good authorities by John Robeson, AM. He's a professor of natural philosophy, and he's the secretary to the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And this is the 3rd edition. So I find this fascinating, and it's super old, and he's got a copy of it. What about this John Robinson? What about this man way back when was talking about what's going on today in a way, right?
Yeah. Well, so I found this title of this book on one of the Phoenix journals that Kathleen referred to a while ago. I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago. And when I'm reading a book and it talks of another title, I, right away get on the internet and research and try to find one for myself. This particular book, I didn't realize how old it was, but I was able to come across it on Google Books. And apparently there's people around the world who take old literature and copy it page for page and put it online. And so this particular book, I came across it. I was elated when I found it. And immediately I could tell as I was reading it, the very beginning, I was very excited. And I knew that this was definitely a page or a tome from the past that had a lot of information that was pertinent to today. So on reading this book, there's, I don't know, about 3 pages of information I'd like to read to you. And really the reason I'm doing that is to give you some background into his head, I guess, from back then. I know that he was a well-traveled individual. I'm not sure how he paid, how he had the resources to do what he did, but he traveled all around Europe, extensively around Europe. He was well educated. I really don't know where he went to school, but at one point in time, he was inducted somewhat into Freemasonry, which was prevalent. It started in England. He's an Englishman, was an Englishman, and it spread around to Germany and even went into Russia and France and different places. So, he was exposed to it, and in his travels, he would go to the local lodges and meet some of his brothers. And he noticed that, it was a little from town to town and country to country. There was a few different twists and changes, from one Mason's lodge to the next, but nothing, too dramatic. But he kind of lost interest and quit, going to these different meetings. So some time went by, and a gentleman that he knew from one of the lodges came to him and gave him a box full of documents and entrusted this information to John and told him that he would come back for it. So John, being the good, moral kind of a person that he was, he hung on to that box. He didn't open it. He was very secure in his possession. 10 years went by, and he happened to come across this individual out on the street who was engaged. This person was engaged in a conversation with someone else. So John wasn't able to stop and talk, but he referenced the man, and they exchanged, a little hello kind of a thing. And John went on his way, and he expected the man to get in touch with him and ask for his box back. Well, he never did. So John decided, well, I guess it's mine. I guess I'll check it out. So what he did then is he opened it up, and he realized that the documentation that was withheld within this box was about Freemasonry, but it wasn't the information that he had been exposed to. It was something different. So it really got him interested. And as he read more and read more, he realized, my goodness, this is a huge conspiracy here. And so he decided that he was going to alert his fellow citizens far and wide to what was going on. And that's, he left us a 400-page volume. It's kind of a tough read because it's written in a way that a person would have written, back in 1790s or 1780s. There's a lot of words that we don't use today, but they have just really amazing, right to the point meanings. I don't know why we don't use these words, because it would save us a lot of sentences just by using one word, Anyway, he did an amazing job, and it was a heartfelt effort that he made. And from what I can tell from his reading, he was a very principled, moral individual. And he was just shocked. He was astonished at what was actually going on inside of these Mason halls after about 1776.
So are you saying that the Freemasonries or the Masonry clubs or, organizations, they started out good and then they were infiltrated? Is that right?
That's my understanding. So these, I guess, kind of regional lodges, they were kind of loosely connected because Freemasonry, had a connection from lodge to lodge, where one of the things that they taught that was the initial kind of maybe part of their oath, I think, or at least one of their agreements, was that you don't talk about religion and you don't talk about politics when you're in the lodge. I'm not exactly sure why they did that, but I can only guess based on what happened when they did start talking about those things. They were able to kind of put a cancer inside of people's thinking to start picking away at society and the moral fabric of the countryside.
Interesting, because I also know that the Illuminati, there was, in my understanding, a very good group of illuminated, souls or beings or whatever, and then they were kind of taken over again, infiltrated, and then the term weaponized. I noticed that they weaponize everything.
Yeah, well, it's still happening today. That's for sure. Well, so the chart that Kathleen referred to was something that I came across again in the Phoenix Journals, and it's titled "The Satanic Conspiracy to Rule the World." And I love to give credit where credit is due. It was compiled by a person named David Emerson Gumaer, and he was an American, and he passed away, I think it was in the 60s or 70s. And this is a shout out to anybody who knew him or was related to him. If you have access to any of his research material, I would love to get my hands on some of that and look at that, because this guy, again, similar to Robison, has done mankind a great service by doing the research that he did and putting together, connecting all the dots, putting together all the connections to this conspiracy. Let me just say briefly, everybody knows about conspiracy theories, right? So supposedly the CIA made up that term, conspiracy theorist, after the Kennedy assassination, because they wanted to discredit anybody that didn't believe in the comical results that they put together in the Warren report. So we've been dealing with that phrase as a way to, label somebody as some kind of a kook, and he's a conspiracy theorist or tinfoil hat or whatever. That's another beautiful term. But there really are conspiracies, okay? And a conspiracy is not a conspiracy theory. I've heard a lot of people using the word conspiracy in the same way they would use the phrase conspiracy theory, kind of saying, if it's a conspiracy, it's not real. Well, that's not true. A conspiracy, in its simplest form, is an agreement between two or more people to have a secret plan or something that benefits maybe them and some other people, but to the detriment of others. So there are conspiracies currently today that we come in contact with quite a bit, and there's certainly been a lot throughout time.
I would agree with that for sure. Would you like to read those 3 pages? Because this is coming right out of the book, right?
Yes.
Of the 1798 book. Let me read the title again, everyone. It's fascinating. It's the longest title of a book. And again, this was written or published in 1798. Proofs of a conspiracy against all the religions and governments of Europe carried on in the secret meetings of Freemasons, Illuminati, and reading societies. So why don't you go ahead? I'll give the floor to you. Okay. And you can read this. He's got this prepared for you folks.
Okay, so before I read this, I just wanted to let you know that in 1776 in America, of course, we declared our independence and we had the Declaration of Independence. And that was actually, let me think, 1776 is when we formed our Constitution, I believe. Or no, the Constitution was later on. So even I'm getting confused here. But that very special date in our history where we proclaimed that we were a free and sovereign nation from tyranny, lo and behold, in Europe, the Order of the Illuminati was formed by Adam Weishaupt in Germany, Bavaria, Germany, 1776. Now, there's really no such thing as coincidences, in my humble opinion. There's a reason that that was formed at the same time that we declared our independence. So what I'm going to read here from the introduction to the proof of the conspiracy doesn't really spell out the Illuminati, because he gets into that further into the book. And but essentially the Mason lodges were ripe to be influenced by the Order of the Illuminati. So the plans that were put in place by Weishaupt and crew were brought in, subtly brought in to the different Mason lodges. So anyway, here we go. Mr. Robison says, I have found that the covert of a Mason lodge had been employed in every country for venting and propagating sentiments in religion and politics that could not have circulated in public without exposing the author to great danger. I found that this impunity had gradually encouraged men of licentious principles to become more bold and to teach doctrines subversive of all our notions and morality, of all our confidence in the moral government of the universe, of all our hopes of improvement in a future state of existence, and of all satisfaction and contentment with our present life, so long as we live in a state of civil subordination. I've been able to trace these attempts made through a course of 50 years under the specious pretext of enlightening the world by the torch of philosophy, of dispelling the clouds of civil and religious superstition, which keep the nations of Europe in darkness and slavery. I have observed these doctrines gradually diffusing and mixing with all the different systems of Freemasonry, till at last an association has been formed for the express purpose of rooting out all the religious establishments and overturning all the existing governments of Europe. I have seen this association exerting itself zealously and systematically till it has become almost irresistible. I have seen that the motive active leaders in the French, I have seen that the most active leaders in the French Revolution were members of this association and conducted their first movements according to its principles and by means of its instructions and assistance. Lastly, I have seen that this association still exists, still works in secret, and that not only several appearances among ourselves show that its emissaries are endeavoring to propagate their detestable doctrines, but that the association has lodges in Britain. If all of this were a matter of mere curiosity and suspicion of no good use, it would have been better to have kept it to myself than to disturb my neighbors with the knowledge of a state of things which they cannot amend. But if it shall appear that the minds of my countrymen are misled in the very same manner as those of our continental neighbors, if I can show that the reasonings which make a very strong impression on some persons in this country are the same which actually produced a dangerous association in Germany, and that they had this unhappy influence solely because they were thought to be sincere in the expressions of the sentiments of the speakers, if I can show that this was all a cheat and that the leaders of this association disbelieved every word that they uttered and every doctrine that they taught, and that their real intention was to abolish all religion, overturn every government, and make the world a general plunder and a wreck. If I can show that the principles which the founder and the leaders of this association held forth as the perfection of human virtue and the most powerful and efficacious for forming the minds of men and making them good and happy, had no influence on the founders and the leaders themselves, and that they were almost without exception the most insignificant, worthless, and profligate of men, I cannot but think that such information will make my countrymen hesitate a little and receive with caution and even distrust addresses and instructions which flatter our self-conceit, and which, by buoying us up with the gay prospect of what seems attainable by a change, may make us discontented with our present condition and forget that there never was a government on earth where the people of a great and luxurious nation enjoyed so much freedom and security in the possession of everything that is dear and valuable. Just a little bit more. When we see that these boasted principles had not that effect on the leaders which they assert to be their native, certain, and inevitable consequences, we shall distrust the fine descriptions of the happiness that should result from such a change. And when we see that the methods which were practiced by this association for the express purpose of breaking all the bands of society were employed solely in order that the leaders might rule the world with uncontrollable power, while all the rest, even of the associated, should be degraded in their own estimation, corrupted in their principles, and employed as mere tools of ambition of their unknown superiors. Surely a free-born Briton will not hesitate to reject at once, without any further examination, a plan so big with mischief, so disgraceful to its underlying adherents, and so uncertain to its issue. Anyway, those are some of his thoughts, and he has a tendency to go on and go on about a lot of things. But in a nutshell, what he exposed by these so-called leaders was that they were complete fake news of the day, that they were lying through their teeth. They were leading people along on a merry little path to dupe them in an effort to basically gain control of their society and the countries and so on and so forth at that point in time. And it really hasn't changed much to this day.
No, it hasn't, because we know that there's a concerted effort out there to control the information. And one thing that really bothers me is the biosurveillance. And I found out doing some research that the Rand Corporation has a biosurveillance company, and they advise governments on tactics and ways to pursue the biosurveillance. Now that's linked into, of course, nanotechnology and the hijacking of people's free will by using electronic science, their smart science, by different means. Of course, a lot of the shows that we've had here on Shining on the Shadows, been trying to talk about and bring to light how we're being surveillanced, controlled. And we know that the information is being controlled. And it stems way back to even somebody talking about it in 1798. Now, I think, would you like to talk about the chart? Is it time for that, or not
almost.
quite yet?
I think it's almost. I think, so I'll shed a little more light about what was happening back in the time of John Robison. So The Adam Weishaupt and crew who formed the Order of the Illuminati, what they did is they went into these Freemason lodges, and they apparently, Adam apparently trained groups of men to be able to be subversives. So these subversives would go in, join up, meet the people, and they would try to ascertain, okay, who do we think we can sway to our side, or to who can we get to, break their bonds of morality the best and the easiest. And so, they would hang out, they would do whatever they do in the lodges. And over time, they would actually act as mentors. They would tell prospective students that they were going to have an opportunity to be illumined with ways to maybe change lead to gold, as an example, to find out about great mysteries, to be able to, really advance as a human being and do all these wonderful things and have all this great knowledge. And so people, we all have egos, and some of us want to be, greater than we probably are. And so, there was certain types of personalities that were really attracted to these mentorships. And sometimes they would take a few months, or sometimes they may take a couple of years. But what these infiltrators would do is they would spend one-on-one time with their subjects, and they would try to philosophize with them about all kinds of subject matters, and try to get the person to, from a moral standpoint, to look at things in an unmoralistic way and accept those unmoralistic thoughts. And so just by doing this, and this was happening in, tens and dozens of lodges in various countries, which eventually in France brought along the French Revolution. And I don't know how many of you have studied that. I have a little bit of knowledge, but long story short, it was a bad thing. The French Revolution was a bad thing. I mean, they were yanking people out of buildings and putting them into guillotines in the middle of the street. It was not a good thing. It was a revolution, right? And it was kind of like modern day, where everybody thinks we need a revolution, or we're going to have a revolution, or a revolution is a great thing. Well, a revolution is not a great thing. A revolution is a way for scoundrels to use useful idiots to cause destruction and eventually death. And that's kind of what's happening right now. And we can go back in history with this Illuminati thing. So as I was saying earlier, people would be kind of trained in these Masons lodges. And, once in a while they would find somebody that they knew that they couldn't corrupt. And so even though that person was in the lodge, they would only attain a certain level of mastery, right? They might get up to, I don't know, I don't have the diagram. There's a diagram, there's like maybe 33 or more degrees of Freemasonry. And in the lower ones, they all have names, and then there's another group, and then there's a group above that, and there's a group above that. And you learn, supposedly as you advance, you become a better person, you have more knowledge, but really what they're doing is they're weeding people out as they go. And they're trying to find the ones that they can use to turn the screws on the rest of humanity. And I think we see that a lot today, not necessarily in the Freemason lodges. I'm not really saying that, but I think we see that today in politics. We see it with certainly with big tech. I mean, they're turning the screws on people by censoring and smearing people. Obviously the media, and so a lot of these techniques that were started way back when are still in use today. I've got more I can say on that. Do you have any questions or anything?
No, I'm just listening because I can see it out in the streets every day. I mean, I went to the flag rally in Hazeldale 2 nights ago, and Antifa BLM were supposed to be there for a vigil for a young African American that had been killed. Of course, he was there was a narcotics investigation, and he did fire at the police and all that. But these people came. They were armed with big rocks about the size of baseballs, and they smashed the black rebel's head, in, and he had to go to the hospital. I mean, I think that we can go all the way from what you're saying, which goes to the top of this chart of the Luciferians, and it goes all the way down to the Zionists. We can see how they use people and exploit every single human being that will listen and partake in it. They will exploit them. And I think the key was when you were talking about how can they get in and corrupt these people that may have been good, but have a tendency to be corrupt, and do bad things. And, but now, it's taking it to a different level, and we're seeing, I guess, the screws being, turned tighter and tighter, where now in Australia, you can go there and, the citizens are, I've heard, they can be stripped down and given a vaccination without their consent. They can be tracked on the phone, the contact tracing, and then the biosurveillance. That's very sneaky. And, the RAND Corporation is one of these groups that this group of people that we're talking about is using in order to clamp down on the control of the information. They want to make you light up on the smart grid so they can do their biosurveillance on you without your consent even, or you may not even know what's happening. That's why we're here today, to kind of give you the history. It's been going on a very long time. You can read the Protocols of Zion, and there's other media that you can read. Of course, I think it's important to get this information out because there's a lot going on. That's what I was going to add. So I eventually get that out. So if there's anything, whatever you want to talk about.
So back in the time that I was referring to with the Illuminati, of course, they were using the technology that they had during that time frame. And as Kathleen just suggested, I mean, as time goes by, technology advances, methods increase, and we have a lot of the things that she talked about back then. So things were obviously different. Things were a lot slower. They didn't have telephones, they didn't have TV, they didn't even have radio. So what they did have were books and conversation. So if you were going to buy a book, you couldn't just go down to the bookstore or obviously get one online or anything. What they had were book fairs, and they had reading rooms where you could go in, apparently like a coffee shop or something like that, where people would sit around and read and talk about things and express their ideas, exchange thoughts and ideas. So the problem was the Illuminati gained control of the book publishers. So whenever there was a book fair that came into a community, it was quite an event. It would be scheduled for a certain time of year, and they'd have booths and they'd have stuff, and people would show up and they'd buy several different books, and then that's what they would have for the year. And I'm assuming that these book at the coffee houses and such, they would exchange books over time. You know, you'd read it and you'd be done, you'd send it over to your buddy and so on and so forth. But everything that was printed was vetted by the Illuminati. And so if it wasn't part of their narrative, it didn't get printed. Doesn't that sound like something that's happening today?
Yes, it does, for sure.
Yeah. So there were a lot of people, a lot of authors, a lot of interesting information, and really, for the life of me, I don't know how John Robeson got his publication printed at that point in time. There must have been an independent print house that was able to do it and print it and get the information out. You know, obviously he did the best he could. You know, it didn't stop the Illuminati. It didn't stop the Freemasons. It didn't stop the different entities that arose because of the efforts to destroy governments and religion and remove the morals from society. There's a passage, I wish I would have had time to find it, but after the Illuminati had gained a foothold in these Freemason lodges and was very successful with, you know, taking men in these different towns around Europe and you know, I guess moralistically ruining them in many ways, then they decided that they would start on women. And he has quite a long, heartfelt passage about what a horrible thing that was to, obviously he held women in very high esteem, and he just was so wrecked by the thought of women being subjected to, you know, these horrific, you know, amoral tendencies. And it, you know, it's quite moving to read that. But we can see where that's taken us. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind right now is somebody like Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris or Nancy Pelosi. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There are women who, you know, in my opinion, are really kind of have outdone men in their kind of evilness, you know, and I'm not really sure why, but I'm not saying anything negative about women, but it sure seems like some women can really be nasty individuals. Not that men can, obviously they are. But.
Well, I think they're saying and finding that the BLM Antifa, and they're the same. There's white women are kind of the ones that are prevalent in the movement. They get very hostile, and I think they're calling them Karens. I don't know. But these women are definitely been weaponized. Absolutely, for sure. They've been corrupted. They're acting in corrupt ways. They're committing crimes. And now we're seeing kind of the connection between the satanic Luciferian takeover of the world, using anyone that they can exploit at this point. And then also what bothers me the most is people are being turned against their will. People that wouldn't normally act the way they do are being hijacked by the nanotechnology and the frequencies and, you know, any chemicals that they're taking in, medications, anything that's chemical related. And I mean, it's just probably birth control. Who knows? I don't know for sure. But there seems to be an all over takeover of, I guess, on a mass scale. It's like mind control on the mass scale. So these guys have been very successful, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think from what I can tell, just based on the things that I've read, feminism, it was a way to weaponize women, and it's been a really bad thing. Feminism is a really bad thing. Now, I'm not referring to, you know, equal rights or anything like that. I mean, yes, all humans are equal from the standpoint that we are children of God. And because of that, we were born with the right to live, to exist, and to not be hampered in any way by any other human being or any government. We have free will choice, and feminism, along with other, I mean, we've had a lot of isms, in the last, say, 80, 90, 100 years. But feminism is one of the things that in modern day times would be the equivalent of what John Robison saw back in the 1770s and 1780s when the Illuminati tried to weaponize women back then. And, that's kind of a connection, I think.
When you talk about that era, in my mind, I was watching The Tudors. One of my friends said, you should watch The Tudors. And I remember was it the libertarians that were burning the books, or there was a big book burning back then. So we do know that there's been a lot of attempts to keep the narrative, I guess, in a certain life stream. So now they're trying to take over the narrative, and America, of course, is the last frontiers. We have the Constitution, and we're still armed. Our Second Amendment's very important. And that's why I think there's an all-out effort and attack on America right now to get us kind of in position to having our freedoms taken away and having more and more, I would say, Khazarian mafioso techniques laid upon us as we continue to give up our rights for security. So there's going to come a time when it's going to be knocking on your door, and you're going to have to choose one way or the other. You think you should choose now, America and freedom, and stand up for your rights against this Luciferian satanic takeover of the world. And that's my head on the whole deal. I think that we need to stand up for our rights. Right now, in my local area, just 40 miles out of the gorge, Antifa BLM thought they were going to come over and cross into Hazeldale. And we've got some really good patriots in Washington. And this is not Portland. It's not even Seattle and some of these other bigger cities. And I always talk about the resilient cities. Resilient cities have the 5G infrastructure, even more military grade weapon systems already set up in the guise that it's to help keep you more secure against climate change. And that's all a big fraud. And so this all ties in together with, who's doing what. So now we've kind of gone over the book. We've gone over Mr. Robinson, and we have about 20 minutes, and then we're going to break at 3 o'clock for 5 minutes and come back. So when we come back, we should dig into the chart. I love this chart. I love it. This chart was found in one of the Phoenix journals. And why do I like the Phoenix journals? Because there's information in there you're not going to really find anywhere else. And it can all be traced back when in the Phoenix journals they reference to, like, say, Dr. Peter Beater. He's got these audio files that talk about the synthetics and the robotoids, stuff that, they don't want you to know, the suppressed information, because they've been suppressing the information our entire lives. So we might as well say, go ahead.
Would you like to talk about
what's up and what's down?
Right. Okay.
The quote.
Yeah, we talked about this ahead of time. So I like to give credit where credit is due. And I got this quote from an American Hopi Indian named Robert Morning Sky. And he told me, and I took this to heart and I ran with it. He said, up is really down, black is really white, and everything you've ever been told is a lie. That stuck with me pretty hard. And obviously, it's not a literal thing, because everything that we've ever been told is not a lie, but we know what he's talking about or referring to. And most of the established narrative, the mainstream information, is not the truth. We've heard a lot about fake news over the last few years, and say what you will about our president, but I say the number one benefit to having Donald Trump as our president over the last 4 years has been his calling out the media. If you don't get anything else from anything that Trump has done or not done, that is the number one benefit to humanity. It's huge for people to realize the lies and the deception that are being fed to us on a daily basis by all forms of media, including the way that social media is restricting free speech.
Yeah, I can apply it to the streets. We've got a brand new little paper here. It's just starting out. It's called the Skamania Observer. It's a conservative approach because the Skamania Pioneer is very liberal. There's a liberal swing to the whole paper. In fact, I have to tell you that there was one event that I showed up to, and the editor and the person doing the paper was inebriated. He came to an event after he'd been drinking. So, we're not being represented fairly in the community. And the Skamania Observer is going to be growing county by county. You can look for that, everyone here in Washington State, to give another perspective, because the narrative, again, has been so dominated by these Luciferian satanic people. So I'm going to ask you, point blank, who is it? Who are they? If someone was to ask you, who are these people?
Okay.
What would you say?
Well, so as far as the chart goes, I guess we're going to look at that. You can't see it really, a really detailed example, but I understand that it's going to be put on by the producers here. Is that time? Are we doing that now? Or wait?
I would say we only have 15 minutes. Let's talk about who they are.
Okay, all right.
And then we'll get to the chart, and we'll put that up, and you'll be able to see it on the screen.
Yeah.
Also, if I'm going to give you the email address to the Shining on the Shadows, it's shiningontheshadows@icloud.com. That's shining on the shadows, one word, at icloud.com. If you want, just email us if you have any questions or would like to get your hands on the chart. It's in a PDF form, and we can send that to you. Just give us your email address, and we'll do that.
Okay, so to answer your question, once again, the Phoenix journals have been just an amazing resource for me. I've read, I believe, all 115 of the PDF versions that are on their website. Were you going to give the website address?
Why don't you go ahead? So I didn't write it down.
Okay, it's PhoenixSourceDistributors.com. And you can, the chart that we're going to be showing you, it's incidentally, it's in the background of what you can see if you're looking at us. There's a PDF version on the Phoenix Source Distributors website. And if you go onto their website, you can click on downloads and then miscellaneous PDFs. And there's 3 or 4 things on there, but the Satanic chart, the Satanic Conspiracy to Rule the World is from Phoenix Journal number 56, if I remember correctly, is on there. And I would highly recommend it. I've seen several charts on the internet that are similar. In fact, I've seen one in particular that looks to me like it was drawn by David Emerson Gumer, just like this one, but it's a little different. And but there's several of them. Some of them there's just so much information on them. It's just mind boggling. But this particular one, you can see the connections, and there's dates and there's names, and it's a really good resource if somebody's interested in researching kind of why we're where we're at right now. Because it's my belief that the more you know, the closer you are to the truth, the more information you have, the better off you're going to be, obviously, because then you can make valid decisions. Reading information, looking at information, talking about information, then we have to use our inborn natural discernment. And a lot of that has to do with our kind of our intuition. And again, I believe that intuitive feeling and that little nudge that we get, maybe the gut feeling and how we are emotionally affected by information is our connection to God. And so it's important to look at all of that and to have an open mind, or really a free mind, because if you're dogged down by a belief that's borderline a cult or something, where anything outside of that is just, you're a heretic or something, then you're not going to be able to find the truth. And again, that's my personal opinion. So we need to have a free mind, and we need to be able to be open to the possibilities. And along with that, we need to realize that, hey, what I was reading or what I was thinking or how I was feeling about it last month, I was a little bit off, because I have new information today that helps me discern that it's really like this, or yeah, that was true, and this too, or whatever, you know what I mean?
I think that's important, because I remember back when the COVID hit and I saw the people dying in China out of good faith, not knowing a lot of the information. I took some precautions and had a protocol when I went out and all that stuff. But then as it progressed and I didn't see the bodies collapsing in the street and convulsing like they said they were going to, and got more information, then I was able to navigate a little bit more. And then as I learned the information, then I was able to dispel a lot of what was going on.
Yeah, heck, I thought there was going to be a couple million dead people just in America alone from it,
Yeah, and they were, again, controlling the information, weren't they? I mean, I don't know if it really happened over there or what they did, but you can see the trickery and the massive brainwashing and mind control operations. And so I just, again, in the journals, you read the journals and you read the journals and you read the journals, one right after the other, and they talk about the Khazarians, but then at some point it says the Khazarians are the Rothschilds. And then there's other groups that formed before that, and we'll get into that. But and people say it's not just the Rothschilds, but didn't all this kind of come from one source and trickle down? I mean, who are they really? I mean, today it's the United Nations and all of that. But in the beginning, and I'm filtering down, mostly it comes from two factions, or I know that's a huge question.
Yeah. There's a lot of dots to connect, but a lot of people, this goes right to God. Okay, this goes right to God. A lot of people don't believe in God, and that's sad. But that's okay. Nobody's going to force you to believe something that you don't want to believe, and that's how God has made it. God allows you to either accept that he exists, or he allows you to doubt or he allows you to deny, or he allows you to completely discredit him. That's your free will choice. So it comes with God. The story goes that there was an evil angel, if you will, that was cast down to earth. Now, we all have an idea, we all have an interpretation, we all have a belief one way or another about that information. And it kind of saddens me because there's really only one truth. It's not my truth versus your truth. It's the truth. You can't change the truth. You can say, well, that's not my truth. Okay, well, but the truth is still the truth, whether you believe it or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change the truth if you believe it. The truth is, okay? So I can't prove that there's an evil force on this planet that's affecting human beings. I can't prove that. Have I accepted that as my belief system? Yeah, I have. And it's based on a lot of research and a lot of just firsthand empirical evidence, okay? So if one is to follow the story where there was a Lucifer was cast out of heaven, and apparently he took along with him 1/3 of the angels, which it just blows me away. It blows my mind that 1/3 of the angels would follow this cat, right? And it was a big power play. It was like, well, I can be God too, or my way is better than your way, or whatever. But it's all part of the play. It's really a play, okay? So this planet has been subjected to a negative anti-God force for how long? I don't know. I'm sure there's biblical scholars out there that think they've got the date figured out and all that, but I can't say for sure. And it doesn't really matter. But society after society after society on this planet has been subjected to this negative force. And the negative force is in the same place that the positive forces are. And it's in a dimensional place that is not, we can't touch it, right? It's not third dimensional, but it can totally influence us mentally, on an energy level. Just look around. You can see people who are demon possessed. You can see people who are enlightened. And I'm not talking about the Illuminati style of enlightenment, which is really not, it's darkness. But I'm talking about, a spiritual upliftedness, a godliness, really. So that's what we have here. We have energy, we have energies. Everything is energy. Our planet is energy. Our planet is alive. Our planet is a sentient being. The solar system is alive. The things that we can't see, that we can't sense with our bodily senses are there, but we can't perceive them, right? So to make a long story short, Lucifer, we call Satan, is the guy that's devised this plan. And as far as I'm concerned, his whole idea is he's going to try to screw over God. He's going to try to steal souls. He's going to try to get as many of our souls and as many of us to flip off God as possible. And he knows he's going to lose. He knows there's no way that a destroyer can win against a creator. There's no way a destroyer can win against the ultimate love. It just can't happen. And the light will shine upon the darkness. And hopefully you and I and you are all part of that light when the shit really does hit the fan.
I love that. That's amazing. That gives me chills when you talk about it, because, you know, the show's called Shining on the Shadows. And it's real important that I use my time on the planet to try to help humanity. And I really want to thank you for everything that you've been saying today. It's just, I can tell you this man's researched. If you want to be a good musician, you know, you practice 6 hours a day like my dad did. Every day, 6 hours a day, practiced his clarinet, and he was quite a musician. Well, Mr. Price researches every day, and he's avid and well researched. So that's why I brought him on the show, because, you know, not everybody's got all that time to plow through all this information. And
hey, we all have the same time.
But it's taken you know,
a while.
A long time to read all the journals. And so, okay, so folks, we've got, it's almost to the hour. Please stay tuned for the second half of Shining on the Shadows. This is episode 9. It's November 1st, so it's 1/11.
Oh, sweet.
2020. Yeah.
Or 11/1/2020.
Oh yeah, 11/1. Whoops, that's right. 11/1. So let's go ahead and take that break. And when we come back, we'll delve into the chart and we'll get more information on how these systems came to be, how they got the plans together and the groups they're using, and we'll just tear into all that information. So let's go ahead. If you don't mind, Katie. Welcome back to the second hour of Shining on the Shadows. Thank you so much. And thank you, Global Enlightenment Radio Network, for giving us an opportunity to get this important information out. So we're back here with my guest, Pat Price, and he's going to go into a little bit about the Phoenix Journals, and then we'll get into, I keep pushing him to the chart, but we'll get to that for sure, because I want to know, and I'm sure you want to know, exactly who's pulling the strings. When they talk about the deep state, you talk about the senior executive services, this SES, or you talk about all these different abilities to control us on the narrative. I'd like to just dispel a little bit about who they are. They've been doing this a very long time. So thank you, Pat, for being on the show. Again, like I said before, go ahead and get right to it.
Okay, so as we said earlier, the chart, which is called the Satanic Conspiracy to Rule the World, was inserted in a Phoenix Journal. Back in, that one was probably printed in the late 80s, early 90s, possibly. These things have been out of print since probably 2000. Yeah, somewhere around 2000. But you can read them. You can find them at phoenixsourcedistributors.com. There's PDF versions, so you can download them. You can read them online. Either way.
You also have audio too, right? Got some audio ones, I think, but it's hard because it's a computer-generated voice. I don't like to listen to them that much. But
they're even in French. I believe they have them in French as well. So that's kind of interesting. So some real dedicated people spent a lot of time putting them on that website. And there's also some other information. There was a newspaper that the group had called The Contact, and it went for several years, and they've also got all those on there. They have a lot of audio information on there, so it's worth checking out. So I'm going to read something out of one of the journals. It says, the Phoenix Journals are intended as a real-time commentary on current events, how current events relate to past events, and the relationships of both to the physical and spiritual destinies of mankind. All of history, as we now know it, has been revised, rewritten, twisted, and tweaked by selfishly motivated men to achieve and maintain control over other men. When one can understand that everything is comprised of energy, and that even physical matter is coalesced energy, and that all energy emanates from God's thought, one can accept the idea that the successful focusing of millions of minds on one expected happening will cause it to happen. If the many prophecies made over thousands of years are accepted, these are the end times. Specifically, the year 2000 or the second millennium, etc. That would put us in the sorting period and only a few short years from the finish line. God has said that in the end times would come the word to the four corners of the world so that each could decide his or her own course toward or away from divinity based upon truth. So God sends his hosts, messengers, to present the truth. This is the way in which he chooses to present it, through the Phoenix Journals. Thus, these journals are truth which cannot be copyrighted. They are compilations of information already available on Earth, researched and compiled by others, some no doubt for this purpose, which should not be copyrighted. The first 60 or so journals were published. Well, we don't need to get into all that stuff. So if the truth is to reach the four corners of the world, it must be freely passed on. It is hoped that each reader will feel free to do that, keeping it in context, of course.
Let me see that book. So they're little, they're nice and thin, but there's 115 of these. It's a great collection. Pat has spent a lot of time researching these books and getting them. So, and my Trek Talks, a lot of that inside information that I talk about that I can prove, but it's like conspiracy theory, they're in the journals. There's lots of gems of truth, like the stuff about Henry Kissinger and a lot of political stuff that you're not going to find anywhere else. So I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because as I have read the journals over the years, I have found reference to people and reference to other books and authors that I've researched and purchased. I mean, I've got a pretty good library.
Yeah, and that's where I found the Global 2000 report too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, they mentioned that, and then you just go and look it up, and there it all is, the Global 2000 report, where they talk about the first consensus globally in order to gain the information and all that stuff. So,
yeah, no, that's great. Currently with the internet, you can find almost anything. I mean, most of the stuff that's in the journals, even though it's been 23 years or something since the last one was printed, you can find on the internet. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that people sent in to the group. Contact is what it was called. Actually, I can't really remember exactly all those details because it's been so long, but they had a newspaper.
Another show.
Yeah, it's another show. I mean, we could spend months on the information, but bottom line is their goal was to get out the word of truth to people around the planet. And there's a specific reason for that at this point in time. A lot of it goes back, I believe it was August 17th, 1986 was the change of energy of, the age of Aquarius. And it has some real significance that we're not taught. And it has to do with cycles. And of course, our sun is, dragging the planets in our solar system along with it through this mega ride in orbit that it has. I think it's a 26,000 year orbit. And we're in a part of space right now that either we've never been in or we were sometime 26,000 years ago. But everything is energy and we're being affected. Our planet, everything on it, everything in it, everything in our solar system, we're all being affected by the cosmic energy for where we're at right now. Our sun's being affected. Certainly that's affecting our climate. And it's not the little ants we call ourselves. Humans running around on the planet has nothing to do with that. If you research the planet's warming and cooling cycles, they've been going on for millions of years. You can look at, there's charts of ice core samples that go back 15,000 years that show how warm this planet was, way above the temperature that we're at right now. And it shows the cooling periods, and we're actually in a cooling period. Our planet has nothing, this has nothing to do with us and what we're doing to it. Yes, we've polluted. Yes, we've done some bad things, but we're not gonna save our planet by giving billions and trillions of dollars to some huge global entity who's supposedly going to save everybody. It's total BS. Anyway, to get back to the journals and the chart, everything that's in the journals, or I should say everything that's on the chart has pretty much been talked about in the journals. So I'm going to...
Should we put it up?
Yeah, if you want to put that up.
Yeah, Katie, go ahead and put that picture up. Takes about 40 seconds for us, a small delay. So you'll be seeing that. And then we...
All right, so...
And you found this chart in a book, in one of the journals.
Yeah, it was in Journal 56, and you can find it under downloads, and PDFs, miscellaneous PDFs on the website there at phoenixsourcedistributors.com. And it's worth looking at. So it only goes back about 1,000 years, okay? And
it's up, she says.
okay, which is, obviously a pretty darn long time. So it starts off in the 11th and 12th century with a group called the Hashashins, okay? And there was somebody called the Old Man of the Mountains. This is somewhere, I believe it was around Persia, which I think is Iran. I believe that was considered Persia back then. And, these people were ruthless. They were terrible. They were horrible people who would kill anybody that came around them and cause mayhem. But they had an earlier beginning. There's some things that aren't on this chart that allude to some of the questions that Kathleen was asking me. So if we go back into like biblical times, you hear about Cain and Abel, and you hear about the house of Shem, which is where the name Semites came from. They were Shemites. There's the house of Cain was a different lineage of people who were pretty bad. And the Hashashins, I believe, were directly related to them. If you go earlier back in time, as I said earlier, we have had many different civilizations on our planet, ones that we don't even know of. There was a group of people that came to this planet, and they call themselves the Serpent People. The remnants of the Serpent People still exist, and they've morphed over the years. I'm not talking about shape-shifting. I'm not talking about living underground. I'm not talking about any kind of that, woo-woo alien kind of mythologies that we have out there. I'm talking about a race of humans that came to this planet, and either they were affected by the satanic energy that was here when they got here, or they were already affected when they got here. I don't know. I can't tell you those details, but in conjunction with the dark energy, they have wreaked havoc on our planet now for thousands and thousands of years. Okay. So, like I said, this only goes back 1,000 years, and to the, I guess it's the 11th century is as early as it goes back. So some of the prehistory, there was a group of people, excuse me, in where Russia is right now. And there was a huge nation called the Khazarians. And they were very ruthless people, and they existed from, say, I think it was the year 300 to the year 400 or something is when they started, and they ruled with an iron fist for probably about 700 years or so, and they were eventually rooted out by the Russians and some other, like there's different tribes that were over there at that time, but they didn't just disappear. They got together with the Serpent People, the ones we call the Serpent People. They were also referred to in the Bible as the Pharisees and the Sadducees, I believe is how you pronounce it. And they were the ones that were behind the killing of Jesus, of Emmanuel, when he was on the planet. So anyway, they hooked up with these Khazarians, and the Khazarians basically adopted the religion from the people from Judea of that time. Now, they're not Jewish. They may call themselves Jewish. They may refer to themselves as Jewish, but they're really not. They've usurped this belief, this religion, and the characteristics and the history of a group of people and how they've used these people. We saw how they used them in Hitler's Germany. They use these people as an ends to their means to control the planet. So as far as this chart goes, we fast forward a little bit because that was back, I was talking about 300, year three in the 300s up to about 700 when they supposedly disappeared. So this chart shows the Luciferians, it shows the Order of the Knights of Templar, shows the Cathars, the Goats, the different lodges, House of the Rothschilds from 1744. Meyer Amschel Bauer was the one that started that. It shows Bavaria, Germany, the Order of the Illuminati, and how they were all tied in together. And as you follow the chart down, it goes down to the Fabian Socialist Society, Marxian socialism, Karl Marx. He didn't come up with these ideas on his own. He was used as a tool to spread a very harmful ideology. And as time goes down, there was the Thule Society, German Vril Society, the Theosophical Society, and the Lucius Trust, and it keeps coming down and down and down through time. As you go from the top and you head down to the bottom, it comes closer and closer to our time. So there's a very interesting spot about midway down. On the left side, it says National Socialist, and it's got the Nazi sign. And they were started in 1919, I believe. Yes, 1919.
Almost like a six.
Yeah, the National Socialist, the Nazi Party, started in 1919 by Hans Horbinger and Adolf Hitler. But it's really interesting because at the same time, the same year, over it was in Moscow, the Third International, and there's a hammer and a sickle. 1919, the Soviet Union was formed. So this is from my experience or my research, I can see that the serpent people and the Khazarians and the people that were influenced in a dark, negative fashion used different methods to try to get their narrative out there. And they tried it with the Nazis, and they used the Jewish people in a way that they could benefit. And when I say they, I mean the ones that call themselves Jews that really aren't. The Khazarians, the so-called self-styled Jews, they use these Jewish people in a way that would benefit them in the future. So as most people know, a lot of people can see, as we fast forward to modern day, like say Israel, you can see that Israel can do no wrong. Israel can do pretty much anything that they want with impunity. And that is, in my opinion, as a result of what they accomplished using Adolf Hitler, a madman, to make the world feel so sorry for these people that they would allow some really nefarious things to happen in their name, even though, like say the Sephardic Jewish people, the ones that are really in tune with the Talmud, they're not the Zionists. The Zionists are the Khazarian Jews, and the self-styled so-called Jews are not real Jews, but the ones that have used the Jewish people. It's really a crazy story, and it's discounted. There's all kinds of information out there that says, no, this isn't true. This has been debunked. This is, crazy conspiracy theory, on and on and on. And of course they say that. So they also tried with the Soviet Union to subjugate the people. And many people realize that there was at least 100 million people killed through communist ideology and communist governments. But those two, supposedly on the left were the socialists, and supposedly on the right were the communists, but they really were one and the same. There's really no difference. There's really no, I mean, you can look up fine points of details and everything, but the whole idea was a method that was being tried to take over the world. So as you go down the chart, you can see the different groups that they've infiltrated. The Tavistock Institute of Human Relations is a huge one. It was founded, I believe, in the early 40s, and they have been the think tank that has been behind the global narrative, whatever narrative that the people that want control, the one world government people, whatever narrative they want to push, they've hired thousands and thousands of people over the decades to do psychological operations against us and to figure out how to manipulate the population to accept all kinds of horrendous things and horrific things. You know, the latest war, the latest medicinal, pharmaceutical, or the latest vaccination, or whatever it might be. They have used the media, televisions, academia, every corporate entity that, you know, a lot of these people are on the same board of directors and corporate people. They have a certain goal in mind. As you go down the chart below the Tavistock, then you come to more modern day, and it's broken up into different countries. There's the Canadian Institute for Internal Affairs, there's the Council on Foreign Relations in the USA, the Club of Rome in Italy, the Royal Institute for Internal Affairs in England, the School of National Administration in France, and then in Russia, it was the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which we know roughly in the 80s that went away, and then Red China, the Institute of Foreign Affairs.
Wow, so they took all of this and they really got organized right in here. Because boom, there they are, all these boxes with all of these think tanks coming from the Tavistock, and then of course the Rothschilds, and then the Rockefellers. But I don't see the Rockefellers over here much until we get down here, and then boom, they've kind of resurrected, and they got the Rockefeller Foundation. I don't want to get too ahead, but I know that a lot of them were killed off. But okay, go ahead. I just want to point that out, that at the bottom there, all those boxes, that's mostly modern day stuff.
Right. So obviously, the Soviet Union does not exist anymore. And, you know, we've been inundated in this country, in America, with Russia, and, you know, how bad Putin is and how bad Russia is, and, how everything's been influenced by Russia. Well, again, I'm going to offer my personal opinion on that. And from what I can tell, you know, Putin was a member of the KGB, supposedly, and he went through the breakup of the Communist Party, and he gained power, and he's been in power, and he's removed a lot of people who were in opposition to him, insubordinate employees, so to speak, and people that were going to try to take him out. Similar to the kind of BS that's happening in the United States against our president. Well, Putin is not a communist. Putin is a Christian, and he is bringing back Christianity. Not really bringing it back; it never went away. But it was people were persecuted for being Christians in Russia. So I'm not saying, you know, that Putin doesn't do things that we don't approve of. I'm not saying that he's, you know, the greatest guy on earth, but we are not facing the same government that we faced when it was the Soviet Union, not even close. And we should be allies with that country because the latest experiment by this group hell-bent on taking over the earth is China. China is where right-wing fascism, and I said that wrong. I said that the National Socialist Nazi Party was the right wing, but I got that wrong, or the left wing. They're the right wing, and the left wing was supposedly in Moscow, with Lenin and Trotsky.
But now it's China.
So
Yeah.
what they learned, what these globalists learned through Hitler's failed attempt to take over the earth and the Soviet Union's failed attempt to do what they were going to do. They weren't so much bent on taking over the world as Hitler was. Anyway, they've used everything that they learned, plus the advances in technology since those times, to really focus on using China as the way, the means, and the power force and the people to take over this planet. And the biggest threat to the entire world, not just the United States, but the entire world, is the Communist Chinese Party, the CCP. And Trump has that right. Trump is pointing that out. And, unfortunately, many of our corporations in this country, the movie industry is one of them, and big tech have been in bed with China for a number of reasons. And a lot of our politicians have been bought off by China. They won't say anything negative about China, but they're our biggest threat by far.
Okay, well, we should get into that a little bit after we finish the chart up and they put that down. So to explain the rest of this now.
Okay, so basically, if you just take this chart into consideration and think about how it synthesizes down from, say, 1,000 years ago down into modern day time, it's kind of like a funnel, right? And everything that has happened in the last 1,000 years has been directed towards right now. And so, Satan or Lucifer, whatever, however you want to refer to this entity, knows exactly what's going on. I mean, he knows how to manipulate people. He understands what people are going to do. And so this plan is like a funnel, like I said. And so it's coming down, down, down. And so in modern day, we have the United Nations. When it was formed in 1948 in New York City, it was formed, I think the Rockefellers actually gave the land to the United Nations building to be built. They referred to it as a temple of understanding. So there's actually a Washington, D.C. headquarters as well. And I think maybe that's the actual Temple of Understanding. It's in Washington, D.C. And the actual United Nations building itself is New York City. So, but there's UNESCO, there's UNICEF, there's the World Bank, the World Corps, the World Health Organization, and on and on and on. And of course, just like with during the Illuminati times, everything that was done was supposedly for good. All their plans, all their organizations, everything that they were doing, it was a lie. And it's the same thing with the United Nations. Exact same thing. So earlier on, if you look at the bottom of the chart, over on one side, there's a House of Rothschild, which is interesting because that's from 1986. And then over on the left, the House of Rockefeller is 1986 as well. So we have kind of a consistent thing going on all the way down the chart where specific things were happening on specific dates at specific times as far as the push of the movement, if you will, to take over the world. One thing to note is the House of Rothschild, which was formed in London in 1986, also corresponds up at the top on the right-hand side with the House of Rothschild, which was formed in 1744 in Frankfurt, Germany. So the Rothschild group or faction has been around for quite some time. And the Rockefellers, they got involved because of oil exploration and the just massive riches from John D. Rockefeller. And so they were kind of basically two warring factions. In fact, if you some of the information in the journals, and Kathleen mentioned Dr. Peter Beater, the Rockefeller kids were actually murdered. And without getting too much into it, has been for quite some time a technology which it's not cloning, but it's making synthetic humans. And essentially, if you have the DNA of a person, you can form a body and you download what's in their brain, their energy cortex or whatever. You download it into a computer system, and then you download that into this replicant body. And so a lot of that's been done with the Rockefellers specifically, with politicians specifically. And just as a side note, the Soviet Union were the ones that developed that technology, and they called their duplications of humans robotoids.
That's fascinating. We're going to get into all that another show.
Yeah.
Another show. Thanks for pointing that out. So then we've got, Rockefeller Foundation goes into the World Zionist Movement, Tel Aviv, Israel. And then House of Rothschilds, Baron Rothschild Foundation. And out of that Rothschild comes black nobility. Is that like BLM or the exploitation?
No,
what is that? What's black nobility?
No, that's just black. It's just a color. It's not like a skin color.
Oh,
it's like the darkness.
Dark nobility, evil nobility, right, or whatever.
Exactly. And you notice how the Mossad is over there.
And the Mossad, over here in the Rothschild.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at the World Zionist Movement at the very bottom of the chart, it says controls Soviet nomenclature in Moscow. So
what's that?
Well, the Soviet Union, the ruling party.
The deep state.
Yeah. So that ties this thing into what I was saying earlier. The World Zionist Movement is totally the Khazarians, totally the ones that Kathleen's referring to as the mafioso, the one world government, the New World Order people. They controlled Hitler. They controlled the Soviet nomenclature, or the people that were in control of the Soviet Union, which doesn't exist anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's always been these power groups vying for power, and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds back in the 80s and the 90s were really at each other's throat all the time. There was all kinds of things: plane crashes, buildings blowing up, people being killed, assassinations, massacres, all kinds of crazy things going on that the average people don't know about. And so in vying for power, well, those things are still happening. We're currently today seeing that go on with a coup in our government. So anyway, I guess we don't need to look at this
well, I see you have MG12 Committee of 17 down here, and that you think that is there's a family of 17 or 17 people now, or what is that?
So, okay, so
you found out more information. I mean, as you learn more, I know that you fill this out.
Right.
Because there's a few things missing.
Yeah. Well, the chart only goes so far, right?
Yeah.
Because David Emerson Gumer.
Yeah, let me spell his name. Gumaer.
Yeah.
Gumaer. And I said
I think it's Gumer.
Gumer. Yeah. Okay, well, we can take that down now.
Well, so anyway, he passed away. And so the chart was not added to, but there's things about what's continued on across the planet that aren't on the chart. And so there is basically, I don't know what they're calling themselves right now, but at one point in time, as
I'm
far
gonna
as
turn this because there's a little glare. So come
Okay,
on
yeah.
in here.
as far as the what was in the journals, the there was 17 families on the world, around the world, that were basically controlling the planet. Basically the ones that were dictating to the Mossad, the ones that were dictating to the CIA, and other groups to carry out their nefarious activities. So I don't know how many families there are now. There could be less, it could be more. Sometimes you hear the phrase MJ12, Majestic 12, and it's some of the same people. It's probably the upper of the upper. There's a committee of 300. John Coleman wrote an excellent book back in the mid 80s, I think it was, about the committee of 300. And if you can find that book, I would get it and read it, because it really has a lot of eye-opening information about the families and the undertakings that they've done over the decades to further their goals of world domination.
Okay. Well, I wanted to get that out for sure. This chart is just fascinating. And I know there's been other people over the times that have sent me different charts, and we are trying to put all those together and overlay them, to see if there's anything that's been missing or information. So we've basically have, 15 minutes. How can people assimilate this information and apply it to today so they know that this invisible enemy doesn't have to be as an invisible anymore? It's a spiritual war, we know that. And they're using high-tech technology to keep the narrative in their own benefit of timeline. So what can people do every day today? What would you suggest that they do to help them overcome this, but yet rise above it and empower themselves, I guess? Based on your knowledge, how do you navigate through it?
Well, hope is a really important aspect of being alive. And there is hope. And like I said earlier, God always wins. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be a lot of strife and a lot of mayhem. But it's very important for people to realize that there is a dark side and there is a light side, a lighted side, or a God side and an anti-God side, basically. And that's really what it comes down to. And so some of the greatest, probably the biggest lie or the biggest lack of information that we have as humanity would be our relationship to God and to the universe and what we really truly are. We're not the bodies that we're in. The body that we're in is a vessel for our soul, and our soul is eternal. Our soul will never die. I'm not sure how long each individual soul has been alive, but the whole idea is that we're working for spiritual attainment. And there's old souls, there's younger souls, and the people that are on this planet right now have been alive more than likely on this planet and other planets, and that will continue forever. And to talk about Emmanuel, to talk about Jesus and use him as an example, his spiritual enlightenment to attain what's called Christhood was his last time on this planet 2,000 years ago. So he was an advanced spirit, and he came in the physical flesh because he had learning to do, and he got that learning. And And so he's coming back. He will be back, and that is when the evil on this planet is cast out. And so just know that no matter what you go through in this life, you are limitless. Your life, your spirit will never die. And if you don't learn something in this life that you need to learn, then you're going to learn it in the next life, hopefully. And if you don't learn it then you're going to have to go through the same BS the following life and on until you get it. So if we don't know that, if we don't understand that, then our strife and our angst and our turmoil is going to last a lot longer. But if we understand and realize that this is part of our spiritual growth as being here at on this planet, and really, as far as I'm concerned, for me, I want to do what God wants me to do. My will is God's will, okay? Or I should say God's will is my will. I mean, I want to follow God's laws and the laws of the universe, right? And I don't want to harm other people. It doesn't mean that if somebody comes at me trying to harm me, I'm not going to defend myself or my family. That's ridiculous if people don't want to, defend themselves because they're conscientious objectors or whatever. Anyway, so to answer your question, there is hope. It may not seem like it because there's so much fear being pumped out there right now. I would suggest turn off your television. Forget about CNN, forget about MSNBC, forget about any of that stuff because they're pumping out fear, lies, and deception. You don't need that. It's the most negative thing that you can subject yourself to at this point in time. There's plenty of information that you can get by reading, by perusing the net, although there's the internet, there's a lot of crap out there as well. And but there's people that are doing a lot of research. There's people that have learned a lot and they're putting the information out there. Social media giants are cutting them off, removing them from their platforms and on and on and on. But, God always wins.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And I found that, I feel a lot better. I do so much better when I practice breathing in and feeling good and bringing in that God energy and letting it kind of flow through my energy field and letting God handle most of the stuff. And we're just supposed to stay calm and focused inside with our energy fields. And it's harder to do that when you're trying to get information from these sources,
Right.
because it's lies.
Yeah.
You can go and I look at that stuff just to see the counter talk. Oh yeah, that's what they're going for today. Or we can talk to some people that are completely liberals, left liberals, and then we know what their media is saying. They'll say something that's a blatant lie, and that these people believe it. And that's part of the brainwashing that's going on. So,
Well, I've been on the left before. I used to be
me too.
considered a liberal. So I know that shtick. I understand it. I put it aside. I left it behind and I've moved on and advanced into better thinking. So I don't need to go back there. I understand where they're coming from. And yeah, I hear stuff. I hear the latest and greatest. And I have a lot of empathy for the people who really, truly believe the lies to the extent that they want to do damage to other people who don't believe what they believe.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to tell us, well, let's say a minute and a half, to tell us why socialism is so bad for us right now in America.
Well, America is based on the idea that we're individually sovereign entities and that we were born with the rights that God gave us, and that nobody and no government can take those things from us. Socialism is is the belief that government is the answer, and that everybody is, it's given to us as a good thing. Everybody's equal. Everybody should be treated the same. Well, the truth of the matter is we're not all equal. Yes, we have equal rights in the eyes of God, but my abilities are not your abilities, and vice versa. So we're not equal. And so we can't make somebody equal by taking away the rights of somebody else just to make them equal when they're not equal. And that's what socialism is all about. It's taking from one person who, say, made it or created it and giving it to other people. And it's just not the way it should be. And usually the way it's forced on people is through a tyrannical government, and which takes away everybody's rights and freedoms and equality.
And doesn't socialism lead to communism?
Yeah, which is basically the same thing. I mean, I'm just lumping it all together.
Okay.
But yeah, communism is more of a government action, and socialism is more of an ideology.
Yeah, because on there I read that it's socialistic. Where did I read that?
National Socialists.
Yeah, National Socialists, and then right underneath the Nazi Party. And also it's got Marx on there, and I know BLM is, my research is suggesting that BLM says it's be like Marx. It's not Black Lives Matter, but they've kind of gotten that twisted around. It's be like Marx, which is a socialist. He was also a satanic worshiper as well.
Well, BLM might stand for Biden's laptop matters. I'm not sure.
Well, folks, we're out of time. Wow, that went fast. Thank you for joining us for episode 9 of Shining in the Shadows. My guest, Pat Price, and of course, talking about the satanic conspiracy to take over the world and these terrible Khazarian mafiosos. I always talk about them. We need to know. My neighbor isn't my enemy. BLM is not my enemy. They're creating these factions, creating a so-called enemy so that we can fight against each other. So let's unite.
Conquer. Divide and rule.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. God bless you, and may you have safe travels. And we'll see you next week, Sunday, 2:00 Pacific Standard Time. Thank you, Global Enlightenment Radio Network. God bless you and take care. Thank you.